to episode 5 of Drafters TV. My name is Ben Hauver. I'm the host of this show, and today we've got a really interesting topic. We're going to be talking about late round sleepers. And when I say late round sleepers, I mean late round sleepers. Look, I've been calling Drafters the premier site for best ball drafting in every single one of these episodes I've done. And it's not just lip service. One of the things that I really appreciate about Drafters is the way that they listen to their customer. They listen to their user base. And we see that in a prime example of what they did last weekend when they announced that drafts are going to be extended from 18 rounds to 20 rounds. So what that means is that there's a potential for up to 24 more fantasy players in a 12-team draft to be drafted in every single draft. So what we're going to be doing in this show is looking at some really deep sleepers, players that, maybe we weren't taking in an 18-round draft, but now that we have a 19th and a 20th round, maybe we should be considering these players. I mean, I know I certainly have. I've already started taking a few shares of these guys in my most recent drafts. So we're going to cover about 8 guys in today's show. But before we do, we have a giveaway to announce. So the prize, a free $11 ticket into any Drafters contest of your choice. All you have to do to be entered for a chance to win is subscribe to this YouTube channel and then comment on this video with your favorite late round sleeper and your Drafters username, of course, so we know where to send the ticket. If you get selected, we'll announce the winner to this giveaway on next week's episode, so make sure you check back and find out if you're that lucky person. Now, without any further ado, let's get right into these sleepers. And we're going to start off with a guy who, I would be remiss if I didn't shout out Peter Overzet for this one. Peter, who joined me over the last 4 episodes to discuss my rankings. You can find those videos on this channel if you're interested in, looking over my quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end rankings, which Peter Overzet joined me to talk about. But I bring Peter up to say that last year, if you were tuned into DFS Twitter, Peter Overzet planted his flag on our Laird and savior, Patrick Laird. And that's who the first player that I'm going to be talking about is. Look, Patrick Laird is the running back 3 for the Miami Dolphins after they added Jordan Howard and Matt Breida this offseason. Look, he didn't see the field much until about week 8 last year. And when he did, he was playing about 11% of snaps. But, then the next week it's 23%, and then 37, and then 59, all the way up to 82. And he worked his way into being a consistent member of a wildly thin Dolphins 2019 backfield. Now, like I said, they added Jordan Howard, they added Matt Breida, and immediately I think Laird fits in right below those guys as the running back 3 on what we would all probably agree is a questionable offense. That being said, I think the path to him being a solid contributor for best ball, especially on a 0 RB build, is right there for the taking. 5 targets or more in 5 out of the last 7 games that he played. Jordan Howard hasn't had 5 targets in a single game since week 1 of 2018. And then we're seeing Laird do it 5 out of the last 7 times of his rookie season. Matt Breida, who is a dynamic player when he's available, again, his career high in receiving numbers are 27 receptions for 261 yards, and that was all the way back in 2018. So I think that Laird has a solid shot to maintain his role as the third down running back, with a chance for that role to expand if Jordan Howard or Matt Breida ever miss time. Breida especially, that seems like something that's maybe more likely than not. So Laird wasn't really on my radar for these drafts, especially because I'm somebody who tends to draft running back earlier and then hammer positions like wide receiver and tight end later. But now, especially if you're a 0 RB drafter, I think that Laird is a player who we can look at who will have spurts of games with 5, 6, 7 targets throughout the year. And that's something that's going to have value. So 19th, 20th round, I'm all in on Patrick Laird. Next up, we've got Miles Boykin, second-year wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens, and he is an absolute athletic beast. 6'4", 220, ran a 4.42 40. That's a 98th percentile speed score, 99th percentile burst score, and a massive catch radius. He's an extremely agile wide receiver, and his physical tools didn't really translate to overwhelming fantasy production in his rookie year. He finished with 13 receptions for 198 yards and 3 touchdowns. That being said, I believe there's a near 0% chance that the pass attempts for Baltimore don't increase this year. I can't imagine another full season playing out where Lamar Jackson is so dominant that he's sitting out the fourth quarter on a near weekly basis. Now look, no disrespect to Marquise Hollywood Brown. I'm actually a pretty big fan, but if Lamar Jackson needs to throw it deep to a big-bodied wide receiver, needs a contested catch, I think it's going to be Boykin over Hollywood, who's 5'9", 166. His upside right now, I think, is being the number 3 option in a high-efficiency, low-volume passing attack, and he profiles as the type of player who can muscle out a few big touchdown weeks. And if Lamar Jackson just trusts him enough to throw it up, I think that we could see him have some real solid value as a late-round best ball player. I've been drafting him as it is, sort of with my 18th round picks, but if I don't go that route, I've seen him go undrafted. So I think with the expansion of a 19th and 20th round on drafters, he's an absolute must draft in every draft. Now, could players like Devin Duvernay take a step forward, the rookie 3rd round pick for the Ravens, and overtake Boykin? I suppose so, but if you look at Duvernay's profile, he sort of looks like more likely to be a Willie Snead replacement than a Miles Boykin replacement. So, besides Mark Andrews, Marquise Brown, there's area for a 3rd player to really step up, and I believe that to be Boykin this year. Let's keep it going here with another athletic wide receiver. This time, Marquise Goodwin, who was traded to the Eagles this offseason for a 6th round pick. Now, it's been a little while since Marquise Goodwin was fantasy relevant, but he is an Olympic level athlete who's had to overcome inconsistent quarterback play and injury over the recent years. Now, here is why I'm willing to spend a 19th or 20th round pick on Marquise Goodwin. First and foremost, Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson are complete and utter unknowns for the 2020 season. Alshon seems about 50-50 to start the year on the PUP list. Deshaun Jackson is a 33-year-old injury-prone wide receiver whose only real asset is deep speed, and I believe at this point in their respective careers, Marquise Goodwin hasn't beat in that regard. I mean, Marquise Goodwin has just about everybody in the NFL beat in that regard, including even Tyreek Hill. Who knows if Deshaun Jackson, entering his 13th year in the league, is still going to be able to fulfill that role. I think Jalen Reagor, who they spent a 1st round pick on, is going to come in and immediately command a sizable role for this team. After that, what happens? Greg Ward and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, are they going to be taking snaps again? I hope not. I've seen how that looks, and I don't want to see it again. Hopefully Doug Peterson feels the same way. I think Goodwin's path to having a few of those pop-off weeks, a few massive deep bombs at the arm of Carson Wentz, is pretty clear. Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey are going in the 130 to 135 pick range on drafters, both going ahead of Jalen Reagor, which in and of itself is kind of, a little bit egregious. But when you consider that Marquise Goodwin is going completely undrafted, he appears to be the best value, I think. And they traded a 6th round pick for him. It wasn't a massive investment, but there's opportunity there for him. And as a wide receiver who could have a couple of 20-point weeks throughout the season for best ball, I absolutely feel comfortable investing a final round pick on him in 2020. All right, next up, let's pivot over to the tight end position, and we're going to be talking about GERALD Everett. Now, over the past couple of days on Twitter, I've seen talk about Tyler Higbee. He's sort of become a growing conversation point, whether or not he's going to be able to sustain the sort of prolific, production that he had at the end of last season. Talking about GERALD Everett, he's seen his targets, his receptions, and his yards rise in all 3 years of his young career consecutively. Last year, he finished with career marks across the board: 60 targets, 37 receptions, 408 yards with 2 touchdowns. He did that all while missing 3 games for the first time in his career as well. So those numbers most likely would have looked even better had he played a full season. Now, the obvious block to his production is Tyler Higbee, who, like I mentioned, went absolutely nuclear to close out 2019. But if you look at the numbers a little bit more, Everett suffered his knee injury in week 12, and it really took that injury for Higbee to blow up. In 7 of the 10 pre-Everett injury games, Higbee posted 25 yards or less. After Everett goes down, that's 4 straight 100-yard games for Higbee. Now, look, for Higbee, the upside that he showed during that stretch makes him extremely intriguing. Not many tight ends showed the upside to do what he did for a 5-6 week span, period. Guys like Evan Ingram, Hunter Henry, guys that we've been looking at for years because of their potential upside. Never really hit a stretch like that Higbee showed us. But that being said, I think it's well within the range of outcomes that we see the targets between these two tight ends remain pretty evenly split the way that we have, really since Everett came into the league as a second round pick in 2017. So with Brandon Cooks gone and the once explosive trio of Los Angeles Rams wide receivers becoming an explosive duo now in Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, I would not be shocked to see this team play two tight end more in 2020 than in any other year they have since McVay's arrival. The price difference between these two guys is striking. Gerald Everett is frequently available in the 17th, 18th, and now 19th and 20th rounds. So I am willing to take that shot on him. And if Higbee were ever to go down, we don't really talk about handcuffing tight ends, but if Higbee were ever to go down, I think Everett would really emerge and become a valuable fantasy asset. He absolutely deserves to be drafted, I think, as a team's tight end 3. We're going to stick with tight end here for our next guy, but we're traveling down south to Jacksonville where there's a fast, big-bodied tight end with decent draft capital that nobody in the industry is talking about right now. That player is, of course, Josh Oliver. He was the 5th pick of the 3rd round for Jacksonville last year, and this is a guy who has the physical tools. He's 6'5", 249, runs a 4.63 40. That's 87th percentile, and I think the reason he's so under the radar right now is because Jacksonville signed Tyler Eifert to a 2-year deal worth almost $10 million in March of this year. Eifert has familiarity with Jay Gruden's offense. He played a full healthy season for the first time in many years last year, 16 games, but the previous 3 seasons, 2016 through 18, Eifert only played 14 games over those 3 seasons. So I think it's important to note as well when looking at this situation that only $3.4 million of the $9.5 million contract that Tyler Eifert signed is guaranteed. So Oliver's true path to being the starting tight end for Jacksonville, I think, is more plausible than what he's getting credit for. In fact, if you were to ask me, I would say that the mouths to feed at wide receiver are a bigger obstacle to the fantasy production of Josh Oliver than Tyler Eifert is. DJ Chark is the clear alpha there in Jacksonville and should command the most targets by far on the team. But after that, it's really just a guessing game. Is it going to be Laviska Shenault? Is it going to be D.D. Westbrook? Chris Conley? I don't know. I think it's very difficult to project where Gardner Minshew is going to be going with the ball this year. That being said, if Oliver is able to flash a ceiling that Eifert hasn't really shown since his, big touchdown season in 2015, Oliver has some upside, and I think he's worth drafting as a tight end 3. I think I'd also be remiss if I didn't shout out my good friend Joey Carrion DFS on Twitter, for really putting me on to Josh Oliver. Recently, he tweeted that he thinks Oliver could be this year's Darren Waller. And Joey was on Darren Waller before anybody I knew last offseason. I remember even laughing him off of a podcast for bringing up Darren Waller as a prospective, fantasy breakout at tight end last year. But when you look at the two players, I think it makes a lot of sense. Waller was on a bad team, just like Josh Oliver is. Waller had almost no NFL production whatsoever coming into last season, like Josh Oliver does now. And lastly, had almost no buzz in the fantasy community until late August. Like Josh Oliver has no buzz right now. Perhaps by August he will, and the path of similarities will continue. So just off the strength of those comparisons and the potential path to being on a team that's going to be down a lot, as I think we all expect Jacksonville to be pretty bad this year, a lot of pass attempts going to be going around, I'm willing to take a shot on Josh Oliver. Let's keep it here with a running back, and one that I'm a little bit surprised isn't getting drafted right now, and that's Dion Lewis. Dion Lewis was the running back 15 overall in PPR in 2017 for the Patriots. He was the running back 28 as the running back 2 behind Derrick Henry in 2018 for Tennessee, and even as a stone-cold backup, managed to average 10 fantasy points per game. Look, Dion Lewis is a good player in my opinion. I expect the Giants' running scheme to be a lot better suited for a player with Dion Lewis's skill set than the Titans' scheme was. The Titans are built to really run it through you with the big man Derrick Henry. They're going to run the ball, it's coming, and Henry's going to run it through your throat. Okay, it's happening. The Giants, on the other hand, are really built around a much more dynamic running back, obviously Saquon Barkley. So there's going to be options for dump offs, getting Saquon into space to make the magic happen. Now, I'm not saying that Dion Lewis is anything close to what Saquon Barkley is, but I think that the 5'7", 193 running back will have a better go at it in that type of scheme opposed to the way that the Titans run the ball. Now, you have to understand that Dion Lewis has essentially no value as Barkley is healthy, right? He's a strict handcuff, in my opinion. He doesn't belong in the conversation with guys like Alexander Madison or Chase Edmonds or Zach Moss. You know, while they do all provide handcuff value, if the guy in front of them goes down, there's also a possibility that they're going to provide week-to-week value as well. I don't believe that Dion Lewis is going to have week-to-week value unless Saquon Barkley goes down. But here's the thing. We know that running backs get injured at a higher rate than any other position in fantasy football. I'm a big proponent of taking these backup-only running backs as the running back 5 or 6 types on your best ball rosters because, look, those weeks are going to be really valuable. And a lot of the guys that you're drafting at the end of your drafts aren't going to have that type of upside that, say, somebody goes down, even if it's only for 2 or 3 weeks. Well, in best ball, we have no waiver wires. You know, throughout the year, say Saquon Barkley gets hurt for a stretch, well, then Dion Lewis is the number 1 waiver priority on the waiver wire for that given week. Not an option in best ball. So you need to draft these guys. And people do draft these guys. Like Latavius Murray has a 9th round ADP. What's the difference between Dion Lewis and Latavius Murray? Say Alvin Kamara and Saquon Barkley both go down. How many more points a week does Latavius Murray average than Dion Lewis, over that stretch of both of them sort of being the RB1s for their team? I don't think it's a lot, and I certainly don't think it's worth drafting Latavius Murray in the 9th round and Dion Lewis not being drafted at all in 18-round drafts. Maybe people are going to start to look to him a little bit more now that we have a 19th and a 20th round on drafters. If they're not, however, I certainly will be. I do think that Dion Lewis is a player that should be drafted, and I will be looking to get some exposure to him going forward. We've got 2 more guys to talk about right now, and when I bring up this first guy's name, I don't think a lot of people are going to be super excited, but if you zoom out and look at the situation, I think that there's enough to really consider him a draftable asset in the 19th and 20th rounds of best ball drafts. I'm talking about Tajae Sharpe. Look, he leaves Tennessee and he goes to Minnesota, the Vikings, who just lost Stephon Diggs and now are depending primarily on Adam Thielen and the first-round rookie Justin Jefferson to be their primary pass catchers. Thielen and Jefferson are not the worst top 2 wide receivers you'll find on an NFL depth chart. It's pretty good. I don't hate it. That being said, they don't really complement each other well. What I mean by that is that both players are really suited best to play in the slot. Somebody's going to need to be out there running routes on the outside for Kirk Cousins. And the Vikings don't really have anybody besides Sharpe to fill that role. The only other notable wide receiver on their roster is BC Johnson, and he's primarily, guess what, a slot receiver. So I imagine he'll probably see virtually no snaps this season as Jefferson and Thielen dominate the slot. And really, who's going to be outside besides Sharpe? Sharpe should see significant snaps at wide receiver this season. I don't know how productive he'll be with those, but in terms of opportunity, snap share, he's going to be a player who's going to be on the field for Kirk Cousins. They're going to have to throw the ball, and I think that alone is a reason to look towards Tajae Sharpe in the 19th and 20th rounds of best ball drafts. And now the final player I'm going to be talking about in this video dedicated to late round gems and deep sleepers. We're going to stick in the NFC North at wide receiver, formerly of the Packers, is Geronimo Allison, who signed a 1-year, $1 million deal to head over to Detroit. Frankly, I think the opportunity for him to carve out a role as the primary slot receiver for Matthew Stafford is being undersold. And when I say undersold, I mean it's being completely ignored. I don't know if I've heard Geronimo Allison's name being brought up once this offseason. Okay, Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones are locked in atop the depth chart as the wide receiver 1 and 2 respectively for the Lions. But as far as the number 3 target in that offense, I think it's pretty much unknown. I don't think we know who it's going to be. It could be TJ Hawkinson, although a recent quote from the Lions OC said that he may not even be fully recovered from his 2019 ankle injury. We'll see how that progresses. I do like TJ Hawkinson, but if he's not healthy to start the year, that kind of, throws a wrench in that. DeAndre Swift. Matthew Stafford's really been missing that guy since Theo Riddick. And it wasn't Amir Abdullah. I think Kerryon Johnson's a solid player, but I don't think that his pass catching ceiling is nearly as high as Swift. So, maybe Swift fills that role. Maybe it's Danny Amendola in the slot. But Amendola is 34 years old, turning 35 this season, and maybe my age bias is about to show, but give me the 26-year-old who just signed with the team to potentially beat out Danny Amendola. Maybe Amendola is the favorite to be the Lions slot wide receiver, but I don't want to take that chance on a guy who I know has no ceiling. I don't know what Geronimo Allison's ceiling is, but I do think it's higher than the soon-to-be 35-year-old Danny Amendola. And unlike some of the other teams in the NFL who have very versatile wide receiver cores and they're going to play their guys all over the formation, the Lions are pretty set in what they do. You're not going to see Kenny Golladay or Marvin Jones kick inside that often. So the opportunity for one of Amendola or Allison to really step up and secure that slot role is pretty high. It's just a matter of who you believe is going to do it. I mean, Danny Amendola's hardly being drafted either. So if you think it's going to be Amendola and you want to take that bet, then draft Amendola. But for me, I'm going to take a shot on Geronimo Allison, who, if you recall, was being drafted in the 8th or 9th round last year as people were sort of assuming that the Packers were going to be running a 3-wide set of Devontae Adams, MVS, and Geronimo Allison. Now, Lazard ended up really beating out MVS for that secondary outside role, but Allison still finished with the 3rd most targets in Green Bay. He didn't do too much with it, but maybe a fresh start in Detroit will be just what he needs. 20th round pick. I think you could get a lot worse than potentially landing Matthew Stafford's primary slot wide receiver. And that is going to be it for this week's episode. I really appreciate everybody who tuned in. If you want to support this show, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel, like these videos, and like I said at the top of the show, we are doing a giveaway this week, an $11 ticket to a drafters contest of your choice. All you got to do, subscribe and comment below with your favorite late round sleeper, somebody I didn't really get to in this list perhaps, or maybe you really liked one of my calls and that's who you want to put your name behind as well. So comment below with your favorite late round sleeper as well as your drafters username, and we will announce the winner on next week's episode. I'll be looking forward to talking to you guys then. Some exciting stuff in the works for this series of videos. So again, thank you for watching, and we'll talk again soon.